Oh yeah. Hey yo, it's the Russo Show. Hey yo, it's the Russo Show.
Hello everyone, we are back for another season of Pizza Film School. In season 1, we focused on the art of storytelling with guests such as Bob Gale, Mark Hamill, Chris Markus and Steve Mcfeely, Sylvia Bizio, Pete Hammond, Taika Waititi, and Josh Brolin. In season 2, we spoke to fellow directors Zack Snyder, Emerald Fennell, Justin Chon, R.J. Cutler, Justin Lin, and Nia DaCosta about their directing process. This season, we're diving into the world of AGBO's essential creative partners. These talented individuals work their magic behind the scenes, contributing their expertise to various aspects of filmmaking, including camera, casting, production, costume, music, and writing. Our guests have played significant roles in shaping not only our films, but also a diverse array of your favorite franchises and classic movies. Today we have the privilege of sitting down with two extraordinary talents, Chris Markus and Stephen Mcfeely. While many know them for their groundbreaking work in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, including such films as Avengers Endgame, their journey began with the beloved Chronicles of Narnia trilogy and the critically acclaimed The Life and Death of Peter Sellers. These films showcase their versatility and storytelling prowess across genres. Chris and Stephen, thank you for joining us today.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us. Appreciate it.
All right.
Anthony, you want to talk pizza?
Yeah, so our pizza is from Blackbird, which is located in West Hollywood, California. We are diving into some deep dish, and we have a thin pizza with a variety of veggies on it.
What I like about this deep dish is there's some ricotta in it. And, oh, by the way, and they are drinking Creature Comfort Classic City Lager.
I'm drinking the Bibo.
Cheers. Oh, you're the Bebo?
Yeah.
I'm Classic City.
All right.
Gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you.
Let's jump into it. We always start off with how you began.
So I taught high school coming out of college, and then realized I wanted to give writing a try before I had too many obligations in my life that maybe it wasn't going to be a great idea.
How long did you teach?
I taught 2 years in San Francisco at my old high school.
And how old were you?
What were you teaching?
I was 21, 22, 23, and I was teaching English, so freshmen, sophomores, and then sophomores and juniors. But every time I would give the 30-second bio of Robert Frost or whoever, the kids eventually could sing-song it to me, right, where I go. And so before he became, world famous poet, Robert Frost was class. They go, he was a high school English teacher. That's right, he was.
That's awesome.
And so eventually I said, I really need to take a crack at this. And so I took out a bunch of loans and went to UC Davis, which is where I met Chris.
That's why so many of us refer to Steve as the Robert Frost
That's right.
of screenwriting.
Screenwriting.
When did the desire to write sort of first occur to you?
I got attaboys for it in school, right? For just in English in general, I was a pretty good student. I didn't really write, like try to write stories and stuff until my senior year in college. And I had always admired, lionized, undoubtedly troubled people like, Ernest Hemingway and people like that. And
Wait,
so
Hemingway was troubled?
Turns out, slightly troubled. And so that was always in the back of my mind, is that's a really sort of,
Romantic.
Romantic's the better word, yeah. My parents really did instill in me this idea that go be what you want to be. Try it. Life's short, give it a try.
So, Chris, give us your backstory now. Tell us how you got started.
I was always a reader and a collector of books, and lined my room with books from the thrift store. It was all I was ever good at. I mean, I'm not a sports guy. I grew up in Buffalo. Buffalo is a sports town, and I would just it creates a sort of sense of alienation, which is a good place for a writer to start. But I never took it seriously as something I was actually going to be allowed to do for real, just because it's so intangible and it's so unlikely that...
Couldn't have had any models.
No, I didn't know any writers, nor did I know any models, for that matter. After I got out of college, I was out in the world for a couple of years, and it's just terrible out there. I don't know if any of you have seen it. That you have to work all the time.
Oh boy.
And nobody really wants you to hear anything you have to say.
You got held up.
I did. I got held up with a gun.
Where? Buffalo?
In Buffalo.
Yeah, wow.
They really wanted to get rid of me.
Interesting enough, I've been from Cleveland. These are like twin cities.
Yeah.
So 3 of the folks at this table were birthed in the heartland.
The Rust Belt.
Yeah, the Rust Belt, the Snow Belt.
Chugging Great Lakes' finest water.
So I, out of interest, but also out of I got to get out of here for a while, I applied to graduate school for creative writing. And it was only when I got there and met the other people in the program, one of whom was Steve, who were like, no, writing's what I want to do. You are fucking nuts, I said. But then I gradually began to go, okay, well, all right. And then you get halfway through a 2-year program and the specter of going back out there and having to drop the thing it took so long to pick up looms. And Steve and I started talking about who gets paid to write.
Precious few people.
Yes. Hollywood is the town that employs the most writers in the world. If there's a place for writers to get paid, it's here. And even the small amount writers get paid here sometimes is more than your successful novel's going to make.
And the program you were in at UC Davis that you guys were in, that wasn't specific to screenwriting.
Not
it was
at all.
creative writing.
No,
Yes.
you're
Right.
supposed to get out of there with a novel or a collection of stories.
It actually has like a focus on, it's not even a joke, nature poetry.
That's very
Either
UC
of you
Davis.
have that novel or collection of stories?
We both own
Theses.
them.
Yeah.
That are very much the work of young writers.
Chris was doing short stories sort of loosely based on Chris, and I was
Really?
doing...
You saw
I saw right through that. And I was doing a historical novel about my great grandfather, who was the most interesting person in my family, and he had stories and I didn't, you know.
Wow.
Yeah.
How did the partnership start specifically?
After the first Christmas, I came back. My uncle had given me a book called How to Sell Your Story to Hollywood.
Okay.
Right? And
It always seems to start with a book.
I want
the uncle.
I was going to say I want that book.
And it was basically just sort of how the business of writing in Hollywood worked, right? Here's how much a screenplay, you know, the guild minimum on a screenplay was. Here's how, it's kind of just basically the nuts and bolts of it. And I brought it back to Chris and I went, this is something we should talk about. Because we'd spent a lot of time together as sort of occupying the same space in that very small program as sort of smart asses, right? I don't remember having the newsflash or anything, but just like, well, what if we tried to write a thing that then they paid money for?
Yeah.
That would allow us to eat food. And so we started writing, that would have been that first year late. We wrote a couple of Friends scripts because that was the hot sitcom at the time.
Right.
Not even intending to
Yeah.
give them to anybody, but sort of like, let's see if we can even figure out how this functions.
Do you remember one of the jokes?
Oh, geez, no. I do remember, because remember, those were always called the one with something,
Yeah.
right?
I want to do a staged reading here at AGBO. One of your friends.
I actually don't know where that one is. We could probably find it. It was called the one with the flippy thing,
it's
and it was
literally on a
based
word processor.
on one of those, you know, the thing you make when you're in the 4th grade, and you could go red, blue, green. So it was. I think Phoebe took it as it was, like it was real, and it was telling you your fortunes or
Oh,
something.
interesting. That's actually a really good concept.
We
for a
were
concept.
23.
Yeah.
And what do we know? So then we wrote a couple of those, and then around that time, Seven came out, and we with a bunch of our friends went to see Seven, and it scared the pants off us. And that's when we said, all right, let's now write a feature, and we'll make it a thriller. And we got a professor, sort of the head of the department, a guy named Jack Hicks, to give us credit for writing that feature in our off time.
What was it called?
Lamb of God.
Lamb of God. It is the least thrilling script ever written.
Look at the range you were already developing at that time, from Friends to Lamb of God.
That's
amazing.
the Lamb of God.
No, the friends were also very violent.
That's right.
Talk a little bit about Peter Sellers. How did that happen?
All right.
Well, I've said before, the smartest thing we ever did in our career was show nobody the thriller. Because we wrote it and we knew it sucked. Because you meet a lot of people in Hollywood, they're like, I wrote it, and the mere fact that they wrote it means it's great.
They don't get a job.
They don't
Well,
get a
you've blown
job,
that
and they
first
get a bad
impression.
reputation, and they become invested in that one thing.
Yeah.
And we both hated it. We finished it. I think we knew we hated it before it was done, but we were like, we're going to finish it. And because it had to be thrilling, we had cut everything. We would make jokes reflexively or start making fun of the thing and then cut the funny lines out because it was supposed to be serious. And we had another idea. For better or worse, everything we like, we're leaving in, whether it fits the genre or not. So we wrote that spec, which got us eventually hip-pocketed by an agent and went round and around with some bad projects. That spec got us... Bill Pullman did not have enough money to pay a guild writer, but he had a movie he wanted to write. So we were available to be paid below guild minimum. We wrote that script, and it was fun. Freddie DeMann had optioned the book, Life and Death of Peter Sellers, set it up at HBO, and they didn't know what they wanted to do with it.
Interesting. So you went in with a take.
We won the beauty contest in that regard.
And then you got in the guild.
No, we'd gotten into the guild on Taco Dog.
Taco Dog.
Amazing. But let me ask you guys this, because you have an extremely sophisticated
structural approach to screenwriting, understanding of screenwriting. But where did you develop that? Did you try to because your writing program, you were writing, but it wasn't specific.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, because we had to teach ourselves screenwriting, right? Yeah. So when I come back from Christmas, how to tell your story to Hollywood. Well, we now have to learn what it means to write a sitcom. How many pages is it? What are the act breaks? What's an act break? And when we sort of graduate ourselves to features, we buy Sid Field's screenwriting book.
By the way, absolutely worth reading.
Yep.
Yeah.
It is.
Well, it's still the structure more or less that we at least start with, and then
Yeah.
You have
needed.
to understand structures. A lot of young screenwriters don't understand.
Frankly, a lot of people don't finish their script or get discouraged because they're going out and it all has to come out of your head and you have to invent it as you go, and God forbid inspiration leaves the room, you're fired.
Right.
Structure demystifies everything. You know, there's a groan on some people's part where they're like, oh, 3-act structure, like hack.
Yeah.
You know, but it's like, it's just a thing.
It's every movie ever made.
Yeah, it's a thing you can build on so it doesn't fall apart on the way there. You can do whatever you want.
Oh, you're going with a roof?
Yeah.
Hack.
You
No, I'm going to sleep in the rain.
Yeah,
That's right.
Artsy.
Yeah.
I like it.
exactly.
You know, to your point, though, like the only thing that Joe and I have ever made without any mind towards structure, only film, was it remains undistributed and unseen.
Took us 4 years to write it.
Were you conscious of the fact that you were blowing up rules, or do you not even know the rules and you just...
We really got into the books, though, after our experience.
Are you talking
Freeform.
about pieces as the distributed,
pieces.
structureless,
Yeah, exactly.
nonlinear, experimental movie?
It hasn't gotten distribution since we last spoke, right? It's still undistributed.
No, it's
Okay.
still, yeah.
And not that there's anything wrong with structureless, it's just a different kind of film that may have a different kind of life.
Right.
But if you're writing a script to be then handed to other people who then have to do their
Write
jobs.
very
with it.
large checks to finance it
Yeah.
that then want to return on the investment that they put into it, then it has to have a certain structure to it.
Yeah,
It's also
gotta
not
hold
the
up.
stories, I don't want to speak for you necessarily here, but the stories that I grew up on weren't the artsy, formless films. They were, Star Wars.
For all the radical reinvention and everything everywhere all at once, it is still a
It's still a
three-act
three-act
structure.
Yeah.
film.
No, my parents' first movie I ever saw, Andy Warhol's 5-hour cut of Blowjob. Amazing. Influenced everything I did.
Process-wise, how do you guys do it? Do you just get in a room?
We outline the heck out of things, whether it's a biopic or whether it's a young fantasy novel or whether it's the MCU. Like Chris and I will sit in a room and we'll get a note card for everything that's interesting or relevant about the story at hand. If it's Peter Sellers, right, heart attack, that's a card. First wife, that's a card. If it's the MCU, it's the snap, that's a card. Picking up Thor's hammer, that's a card. And so eventually we'll just have way too many cards, but a pattern will form if we start staring at it. Things will repeat. Well, we can't do this 6 times, can only do it 1 time. What's the worst thing to happen on this table? Right? What's the darkest moment? Maybe that's the end of Act 2. Let's keep that in mind. Over the weeks, a shape begins to form, particularly if you're adapting something.
Yeah.
Right? Like, we all understand that Peter Sellers had a life, and here's how are we gonna characterize that life?
Because a life isn't a movie, and a novel isn't a movie, and a comic book isn't a movie. So you have to go, I need to reshape this thing. I'm gonna need to cut stuff out. But the sad fact of it is, even though it sounds like we have a system or a methodology, it always starts with us in a room trying to remember how the hell you write a movie.
Did you develop this process based on things you had read or just from getting in the room and combination of things you read?
Good question. It started with Peter. I think it started with Peter Sellers, because what we said to ourselves was, once we got that job, we each took the book that HBO had optioned, and we said, all right, I'll meet you in 2 weeks. Write down everything you love. And then we each made lists, and if it made both of our lists, it got a card. That was kind of the idea.
But also even pre-Sellers, because we wrote The Friends and The Terrible Thriller sitting next to each other at a computer, going like, that's not how I would phrase that sentence.
That's a comma.
And it's like, you are fighting over stuff that does not matter, and it takes a million years, and it's irritating. We have to write
Some part of it. Yeah.
junk first draft parts separately.
Why not together?
The first draft barely matters. It just needs to exist.
The spit draft.
Yeah. And you are taking so long together going, use a semicolon. No, I don't use semicolons.
We're done for the day.
Yeah, fuck you.
There's a reason we each got into writing. knowing we would spend time alone in a room typing with our thoughts, right? We didn't necessarily want to abandon that. So the idea that we could outline a thing together, give ourselves sort of a sturdy foundation, then go away for 5 or 6 weeks and write 60 pages separately and come back together and put them together and then revise that as if someone else wrote it. That's kind of the system.
All the cliches are true. Writing is rewriting. It only gets good when you rewrite it, and doing it this way gets you rewriting faster.
Yeah.
Right. It's a reason that experimental pilots are paid a lot of money is because prototypes
Blow up.
usually crash, right? Well, the prototype is not intended to fly well.
I don't remember exactly how this came to us, but it's very early in our career, and somehow both Joe and I had the script prior to the movie being made, The Life and Death of Peter Sellers. And we were very energized by it and excited. So it was like the fact that we would end up finding a road back to you guys so many years later was really fascinating to me.
Yeah, that script did its job in a lot of ways, right? It got us our first credit, so HBO actually made the thing. But also, in the same way that it was given to you, it was given to Andrew Adamson, who was about to make the leap from Shrek and Shrek 2 to doing live action, Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And so he had the same idea, like, oh, that's an interesting script. Maybe I'll talk to them about the rewrites on Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
And
that's what led to that. It was one of the hottest scripts I can remember.
Yeah, it had a life where
Sellers?
people
Yeah, it was a
passing
very
it
hot
around.
script.
Yeah.
Everybody was talking about it.
was.
I'm very grateful that our first thing out of the gate that people put eyes on was challenging and funny and weird. And if we had come out with an action movie, that's who you are, but that movie is very hard to classify, and so you don't get a stamp as, people tried to make us the biopic guys, but that movie only worked because Peter Sellers was nuts, and therefore you could do this with him.
Isn't it a fun, reductionist business?
It's
Crazy.
wonderful.
Everyone wanted to make a Jackie Gleason biopic. It came from all sides.
They wrote a great biopic. They're great at biopics.
Yeah.
And then we did Narnia, and then we got every YA novel sent to us, and it's up to us
It
to
was
say
an
no.
important piece of advice that Soderbergh gave us early on was do not let them pigeonhole you.
Yeah.
Keep sticking and moving. Surprise them, confuse them. It's better that people are confused by who you are than that they think you are the experts in one thing, because it's going to be a very boring career if you're the expert.
Fair enough.
And when you got the Winter Soldier gig, we
Yes.
were confused.
We were so confused.
And it worked
That's
out
right.
great.
We had written two
Why?
things for Soderbergh, remember? It was a gangster film. It was a sprawling, epic gangster film called Murray Hill. And then we wrote Collinwood. This is going to be a lot easier to get financed. Let's go do the comedy. But then we got pigeonholed for 10 years.
If you like the pigeonhole, it just means you found your niche. And we worked at Marvel for 10 years because we really liked it there, and it kept giving on a creative level. So repeat yourself if you feel like you're building on something, or you're learning something, or you're growing.
How did that lead to Marvel?
The second movie is coming out, Prince Caspian.
Right.
Got this weekend all to itself, but what they didn't realize is that the weekend prior was going to be a movie called Iron Man. It's a monster.
The way you just said that really just changed the whole context of the character.
It was a live-action version of Iron Giant.
So Marvel immediately announces, okay, we're working with house money. We're going to make Thor. We're going to make Iron Man 2. We're going to make Captain America. And we're going to lead up to the Avengers, because that big risk had clearly paid off. And so we don't have a job in the summer. They announced a Captain America movie. Our agent says, you want us to go after that? And we said, yes, please. Yeah. So we chased Captain America from, call it, June of 2008, and didn't land it until the holidays of 2008.
It's a tough process at Marvel. Right?
It is, and it was early on too.
And they were probably learning that we were comfortable with collaboration and changing an idea and working together to build something that worked, which I think is.
Because you've been doing that your whole career with each other.
We have to do it with each other.
But we'd done it on Narnia. We sort of skipped over real quickly. Like, it was our introduction to blockbuster filmmaking, which is iterative, right? You're just making this thing over and over and over again.
On a time frame, in a compressed schedule.
That's right. That's right.
A lot of work done in a very short time frame.
That's right.
So you have to be open to.
So, they're not hiring writers who've never done it before, right? They know that we come in and know it's a grind. You don't like this idea? How about this idea? You don't like this idea? How about this idea?
This is why it's iterative, because remember with Captain America, we had a $10 million opening sequence that was set in the past.
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
But this was going to be a reintroduction to Cap and Bucky's relationship during the war to just catch the audience up. And I remember we're about 3 months out, and this is why blockbuster filmmaking is iterative, is Lou D'Esposito called and said, guys, it's too expensive. You gotta come up with a different way to open the movie. That we just can't afford that.
They were realizing you don't need to necessarily repeat the information. People are bringing the old information to the next.
Right.
So that's why Endgame and Infinity War move like gangbusters, is because you don't need to tell anybody's story, because everybody knows the story.
Yes, we're in episode 20 and 21 at that point.
Yeah, it's like, I don't need to tell you who these
Or 20 and
You
22.
know, you said something earlier that I think might, some people might find educational. This idea that like your long audition process for the first Captain America film was almost like free writing in a way, right? Because you're sort of continuing to like conjure ideas, execute ideas in the hope of landing the job. Our process to get hired as directors on Winter Soldier was very similar. I remember asking Nate Moore, our producer, one time, Nate, what made you want to bring us in? Because unlike you, we showed up on their list somehow. And he said, we bring people in to talk to about these movies that may not be hireable. Like, you don't have to be hireable in order to come in to talk about the movie, because it's a creative deep dive. You know, you may end up saying something about what this movie can be or where it can go that we haven't thought of yet.
Yeah.
It's almost like creative research, just talking to creative people whose work you admire, and something might come out of it, even if it isn't a job.
Right. Any number of guilds will prick their ear up when they say that and go, well, that's exactly the problem. And that's the problem of art versus commerce. It's like art is collaborative. Film is unbelievably collaborative. You have to find that place where you're comfortable with sharing a certain amount without knowing you're necessarily going to get $1 for every word.
Talk about a little bit about the process on Winter Soldier. How did we all meet, and how did we start working together?
Well, let me just say this real briefly, because I remember when we were meeting with Marvel, eventually through our series of meetings, we got to the point where they were willing to show us a script.
Oh, interesting. So you had a long gestational period before they showed you
I don't
even.
think
Third
we saw the
meeting?
script till the third
So they were
meeting.
just
We
calling
had
it
two
Captain
meetings.
America 2.
But were they saying they were giving you a sense of the tone or the
General area. What would you do with this?
Yeah, what would you
right?
do with it? And then finally we read the script, and I remember when I read the script, I remember we had the same feeling. It was like when I was describing when we read
Right.
Life and Death of Peter Sellers. We read the script and we're like, look at each other and we're like, this is a movie.
This is already a movie.
Yeah, this is a movie.
I get you.
And we came up with a very strong point of view, which was actually in line with what you guys were already playing around with, was how do you reinvent him? How do you modernize him? Is he in conflict with the modern era? Would that be more interesting?
Yep.
And then Jeff Groth, who edited Cherry and Gray Man for us, was working on Community with us at the time. And he created you would call a rip-o-matic, like
Of other movies.
a trailer of other movies that, frankly, when we look at now, is very close to what the tone for Winter Soldier was.
Yeah.
Well, that's the one thing we always reflect on, because that audition process was so long and so involved. By the time we got hired, we knew the exact movie that we wanted to make. Like, we had figured the movie out, you know, from our point of view as directors.
We had gone around and around with Kevin on trying to do the first draft, and eventually landed on basically, 3 Days of the Condor. Because he didn't get a chance to be the Cap that most people know from the comics, which is the man out of time.
Right.
His first movie, he's the man in the proper time, and so
Right.
now that's a different story. And then in the Avengers, he's one of 5 people. There's a couple of beats of him not understanding the century, but we wanted to explore that. But we didn't want to explore it as, I don't know how my iPhone works, right? We wanted it to be more about how we missed Watergate and 9/11 and all these things, right? Like how all the compromises that we made along the way. And that led us to that genre, right? Where you don't know who you can trust. And
We all love deception and corruption, but it's Captain America. You can't corrupt him.
Yeah.
But you can bury him in it, and have him fight his way out of it. Initially, when we came in, I think the idea, either between us or generally agreed, was like, maybe you don't do Winter Soldier right away because Bucky just died in the last movie. Like, maybe that's a thing you'll pull out of your pocket later.
Well, that was the most exciting part of the story to us. We grew up on Luke and Darth Vader, right? The Shakespearean drama that comes from family and conflict with each other. The emotions involved in that are significant. So when we read it, we went, oh, this is fucking Star Wars.
What more tragic fate than to become enemies with your best friend?
Yeah, and it's the through line through all 3 Cap movies.
the script, I'd have to go back and look at it, but I remember it's generally the movie, But then you guys came in, and then we spent a year beating that up and beating in my mind, every scene got to be an A or an A+ scene, and it wasn't before, right? And you guys came in and said, no, what if you see this chase in Brazil, right? This is a real life car chase. Let's do that, right? And
There's
so
a
suddenly,
YouTube video chase of a criminal
Crazy.
who had stolen an SUV, was being chased by cops in Brazil,
Right.
and was smashing his way through traffic in the SUV, which is where the Fury car chase came from. Because we were looking for real world elements that could help us ground,
That's
like,
right.
Ground the superhero
you know, what's
tone.
the physics of Cap? How does he move? Why does he move that way? If he's a super soldier, what could he endure? Could he literally leap out of a plane and
Right.
take the impact of hitting water at, terminal velocity and pushing reality, obviously, because we're making a superhero film?
sure, but
trying to find something that was rooted in
But
real-world
also,
physics.
like, I love the first one, but he's unskilled effectively in that one. He has a lot of natural abilities, and he's jacked up on steroids. But his fighting in that movie is basically punching. In the second one, it's like, okay, there's an onus on us now to prove why he's a superhero, why he would be in the Avengers. And that ship sequence, no one has any doubts at the end of that.
That's right.
Like,
He is a covert operative who's been trained in the most efficient forms of fighting.
and it's a great combination of it's impossible, but it looks pretty real.
that's a sequence or a scene that does like 17 different things, right? It is announcing this is not your father's Captain America. It is giving you all sorts of visceral sort of delight. It's introducing about 4 different characters that you're going to need to know where they are on the chessboard. It's creating the MacGuffin in the first place. Like, it's a really solid opening. Every script that a screenwriter writes, the ones that turn into movies, turn into a percentage of the movie you saw in your head. Peter Sellers is pretty good. It's about 75% of the movie we had in our heads, right? We've had other ones that are 49%, right? But I always say,
Care to elaborate on which ones those are?
they're not a Russo brother picture. It's fine. But Winter Soldier was like 110, 120. Because everything got better than the first and second drafts. And then the professionalism of the filmmaking, I always thought was eye-opening to me. The anecdote I like to tell is we started that movie with the elevator scene. In my mind, it's supposed to be the first 2 days of the shoot. We're then on the 4th day of the shoot, and we're still in the elevator. And Chris and I are going, somebody, like, we're all a little
Actually, Nate
concerned.
doesn't sweat, but
Right? We're already over. And then you had Jeff Ford cut it together pretty fast just so you could show the crew. And so the crew got to see it maybe a week later. And everyone's temperature went way down because it went, oh, we're in good hands. Because that was awesome, even if in its roughest form.
Yeah.
Right? That's how I've experienced all of our shoots since then, right? Is that
it takes too long.
it all takes too long and we're way over. But it's going to come out in the wash pretty well because I have a lot of faith in the filmmaking.
Yeah, it's not haphazard.
Yeah.
Well, I think to your point, when I rewatch those movies that we made together, those Marvel films, that's what I'm most reminded of is the level of work and effort and craftsmanship that was put into every scene in that movie. It's been such a close collaboration with you guys where we're very involved with you during the screenplay development phase, and you guys are very involved in our process as directors, I feel like, as well, through execution. We're constantly turning to you guys. Nobody's responsible for authoring more of the MCU than the two of you, right? And as we moved forward from Winter Soldier into Civil War, that is really where things blossomed in the sense of how much of the MCU was going to be contained within that movie. Even though it was a Captain America movie, we were still having Iron Man, we were introducing Spider-Man, we were introducing Black Panther, etc. It became almost an Avenger movie.
Yeah, they really opened the toy box.
Yeah.
And Kevin popped into the room twice during the development of that and go, Civil War, and then leave. And then he also popped in and went, and then left. I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, we knew we liked Bucky's past coming back to haunt him as being sort of an important emotional maybe B story, but our A story was...
Well, we had a version of what became the Zemo story.
Civil War, when it was decided that that was okay to do, really sort of elevated everything. Surprisingly, that B story slotted into place nicely, because I think at one point you said, why didn't the Winter Soldier kill Howard Stark? If we decide that that's the case...
Well, it's because,
then
we essentially...
that's kind of what we said.
We said it in Winter Soldier.
And then that allows you to, if you play your cards right, to get to a moment late in the movie where Tony will learn the truth and be unable to stop himself from going bananas.
The ending is a really uncomfortable fight between two people you like, 3 people you like, and the moral polarities have shifted from where you're comfortable. Cap did something wrong, and Tony lost his mother. And so everybody's in the wrong place for their character profiles, and they're beating the crap out of each other, and it just feels like the genre is confronting itself.
Unique in commercial filmmaking, historically, right? That you would take 3 really popular characters and then have them become the climax in conflict in like a death battle.
Unless you have this progression and a build and a change in the characters, it becomes another episode, and it does become a sequel.
Right.
You know, and that's when you are what people accuse you of being, which is you're just repeating yourself.
Right. You know, Marvel got impressive when they realized, oh, it's a big soap opera. You know, not to be reductive, it's not just a television series, but if you bank on the fact that the people have seen the previous one and you build on them instead of just giving you the same thing but 10% different, then you can actually do something impressive. And they didn't really figure that out, I think, until Winter Soldier.
Well, this was part of our conversation, right? Because us being in that room for a few months experimenting with what the movie looked like was us helping them define that this narrative needed to start moving in a more complex direction, the overall narrative, or they were going to be stuck without any real textured storytelling in the next round of movies.
Yeah, and Infinity War would be a completely different movie had Civil War not ended where it ended.
It doesn't get made.
It doesn't, and nor do we kill half the characters at the end of the movie.
No.
Right.
Nobody would have endorsed that. To be fair to everyone who was involved in the Civil War, we all put our careers on the line and said, we believe. Iger said, okay, I'm going to endorse you in this crazy idea. And then because the movie made $1 billion plus, everybody went, oh, maybe this group does know what they're doing. And then we were able to convince them that we should kill half their characters at the end of the next one.
Let me go back and ask you one thing. So when you were writing First Avenger, because we're just thinking about how you're pulling certain threads forward and writing the relationship between Cap and Bucky, how much were you thinking about where that would go in the future, where you could go with it?
We certainly made it clear that he was captured by Hydra and experimented on, left that in there as a dangling thread because we knew that in success, maybe he could be the Winter Soldier someday.
I mean, we
'cause
knew
read
that
Blue
comic
Baker
run
like anybody else.
existed.
Yeah.
How complicated they're willing to get is still totally unclear in terms of mucking up their storylines. When I look back at Marvel, the thing that pleases me most is putting miles on those 2 guys. When you've made 4 movies beforehand showing this guy go from a little 20-year-old man through hell all the way to here, you're never going to get that opportunity to actually, the character has a past that you've seen.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating how it was long-form storytelling, like series are, but done as sort of like the largest sort of theatrical releases.
At a time, I think, when the business needed an experiment like that. Audiences were ready for something larger to invest in. The amount of hours you commit to that have value to you.
Yeah.
And so now you're assigning emotional value to the story that you're watching based on the commitment. And nobody had ever said, hey, we're going to get you to commit 14 hours, 16 hours.
Right. Isn't that a function really of just Kevin saying, why don't we do this like the comics? You know what I mean? Where all the characters come in and out of each other's lives.
I think without question.
Yeah.
Right?
It is.
But he had to prove it every time. This is also where you look back at his historic career and you go,
Crazy.
Every time he rolled the dice in those first 10, he had to get,
he got, is Snake Eyes good? No, it's bad. A 7. He rolled a 7 every time.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, he hit the number every time, right? You want a 7 first out and then the number.
One of us is a degenerate gambler,
Yeah.
clearly, and that's not me.
The other one's just degenerate.
The analogy holds, but the point is, this was an incredible gamble, and by any account, should have failed multiple times.
Yeah.
Should have never gotten as far as it did.
Yeah.
Which takes us to Infinity War, which was, I believe, is it movie 19, movie 20? I don't remember.
It was 18 and then 22.
What was your initial reaction to the idea of doing Avengers as a 2-parter, Infinity War and Endgame together?
Exhaustion. Because I had about a 1-year-old at that point, and I remember going home and talking to my wife in the player area that our house had become this is gonna wreak havoc on our lives. It could be amazing. It'll be profitable. It's a huge opportunity, but it's going to blow all of this apart.
Traumatize everything
For
else.
now.
They had sort of set this up nicely for us. We had an office on the 4th floor. That was our Civil War office. And then the Agent Carter office was on the 3rd floor because that was in its first season on ABC.
I
And
came in to direct an
and you did episode 2, and we created the pilot. That was a very challenging time. I remember getting heart palpitations going home because there's a lot going on. But I also remember every day driving to work going, well, how often do you get to write a television show and a movie at the same time? And like, this is
Mr. Optimism over here.
Well, I was little, yeah.
This, what you're talking about is, I mean, it's a very real part of the process, and it was
Yeah.
very unique to the scale of those endeavors and the momentum behind
Yeah.
how the whole thing was moving at the time. We were kind of all on this train that just kept rolling, and we sort of had to manage it as best we can. It was different for all of us in terms of how we experienced that and how we had to manage it. But I always remember for myself, from the production of Civil War through the end of Endgame, 3 movies.
Yeah.
There was a 4-year period.
Yeah.
And I lived away from home for 2.5 of the 4 years.
Right.
Which is,
And your family did not come with you. They were in school.
yeah, they were in school. They came out for a little bit one summer, you know, but it's like, that's a massive amount of time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To
It's a
be
big
away
choice.
from your family, yeah.
That's why we need to all turn and address the California State Legislature and see if we can get some tax cuts.
Tax credits, that's right.
Let's talk about Thanos. Taking Infinity War and Endgame as a single story. We knew that we needed a villain to be developed so significantly that it would have a similar impact on the audience as Darth Vader, right? Like, that was the mission. We started at some point referring to scenes as shoeboxes. You know, once you have an understanding of the general shape of the structure, then you could start figuring out scenes. And scenes to us were like shoeboxes lined up on a table into which you could put things or take things out of, right? Well, what if we put these characters into this scene that happens on a ship traveling to a planet where there's going to be a showdown? Well, it's just Spider-Man and Tony. No, let's put Strange in the shoebox. Or, you know, now you've got these 3 characters in the shoebox, and now the shoebox is doing X. Screen time real estate is limited to, you know, on a movie this scale, 2.5, at the most 3 hours in Endgame. And when you assign screen time to characters, that's how you get the audience to feel the impact of those characters.
Yeah.
Less screen time, sometimes harder to be more impactful. More screen time, easier to be impactful. We assumed that we would need more real estate for Thanos to be impactful. So at some point, the decision was made to give the movie to him.
Yeah.
Do we remember when that happened?
The second draft was the one where it was literally narrated by Thanos. He was effectively in control of the movie.
Right.
It was a...
Right. Boy,
it-
we tried to cram a lot into that.
I think
Yeah.
we were vibing off of like a gangster film. And so this was almost the origin story
So it's Goodfellas.
of a gangster,
Yeah, or,
right?
or
Anti-hero.
Godfather 2.
He was
It's
narrating
not
it
narrated, but yeah.
as if the villain were telling his own story.
Undoubtedly, that draft is what led to, I'm going to guess the 3rd draft is closer to what the movie is,
Yeah.
which is, so we're trying to introduce Thanos and we're giving his Black Order way too much screen time up front because we need to.
Well, I think that
make
was a
them heavy.
Kevin conversation, right? He was like, I like the experimentation, but I think you guys are assigning way too much time to him, and you need to find a way to bring in the heroes into the story.
Right.
And I remember Kevin coming out to Atlanta with comics panels.
Right.
And the point I think he was trying to make is you haven't cracked comic Thanos yet.
And by the way, his comic interpretation was limited.
Troubling.
He
Yeah.
had an intense amount of hubris that made him almost stupid at times.
That's right.
Yes,
That's right.
but he gets his own comics is all I'm saying. Like
Right.
he's popular enough and puzzling enough that he has sort of created his own space in the comics.
Right. So we have the problem of how to create the new Darth Vader, right? And we've got 23 heroes, right, who occupy some degree of similar space, right? So, and if we say to ourselves, well, those are your protagonists and he's the villain, you're never gonna, that ratio traditionally isn't gonna get you what you need. So if we just bite the
Well,
bullet
it's
and
not
say,
going to get you enough on either side
either
because
side.
with 23 heroes, they're going to have a shitty movie too.
Remember that moment
so
you're
that's the
talking
moment.
about.
So at some point, I think we just say, listen, let's talk about this as if it were Thanos' movie and he's the protagonist and they're the antagonists. What does that look like? And we go through the movie and it's all right, he's doing this, he's got the midpoint, he's got the end of 2. The worst thing that can happen in the movie isn't that Gamora dies. It's because Gamora dies, and that's bad for him. That's a loss for him.
Yeah.
Emotionally
Right.
impactful.
He has
to
to
him.
take
It's the biggest decision, right? And then everybody else, you go, all right, if we're comfortable with that, and we're comfortable with all of these superheroes, 23 famous faces, all having 5 scenes apiece and maybe 20 lines total.
Most of whom had 2 or 3 movies up to that point.
This is the thing.
I remember, like, again, just to put an emphasis on this, because I remember that moment you're describing, Steve, where when that flip happened, when we stopped thinking about them as the protagonist and Thanos, the movie stopped kind of collapsing under the weight of it all. And it got so much simpler.
We knew the ending to set up Endgame was going to be he snaps, and that's that. What is the structure that leads to that ending? You know, that is a triumphant third act for your bad guy.
Right.
You know, so it's like, well, let's build from there. So then the structures, he's dictating structure if that's his third act.
This is where understanding traditional structure is critically important to playing with traditional structure, right?
Yeah.
You have to know it backwards and forwards to fuck with it.
Right.
I would argue again, novel for a movie of this scale where the heroes lose, right?
Yeah.
And the villain wins.
Right.
That structure shifts 2 key critical moments in the film. It's almost Thor's movie if he wins when he throws the axe at him, right? He
Yeah.
hits him in the chest. If he'd gone for the head, it's Thor's movie.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't go for that, it's Thanos' movie. It's that moment where Thanos snaps. That's where we tell you, we announce to you, it's his movie. Because we go inside his head and he talks to his daughter and he talks about how significant the cost was for him to do what he's done the entire film.
And note that the only other character vying for that role as, the protagonist is Thor. They meet in the opening of the movie. Follow that arc.
Thor follows all the same beats.
All the same beats. It's
when
just
you're playing
it's
with
the black
structure
notes.
with an ensemble, right?
Yeah.
They're usually, and this is something we've learned from these films, you have your traditional Act 1 moment, you have your midpoint, you have your end of Act 2. These are the pillars by which we talk about structure in these films, and then the climax. When you're working with ensembles where characters have to be in the story at significant enough weight that the audience feels like they're leads of the story, they usually have to have moments that occur around those pillars,
Yeah.
right? And so you have multiple characters having moments around those pillars. So if you were to go back and study the film, Thor would have a lot of similar moments to Thanos throughout the movie. We are cutting away to Thor, building the greatest weapon in the universe, almost dying to build that weapon. And now he has something potent enough to challenge Thanos. And this is how we're fucking with you. Because again, we haven't announced yet that it's fully Thanos' movie. You're not expecting that you're going to get that ending that you get because we have told you that Thor is on the traditional heroes'
That's
position.
right.
So your instincts are telling you,
Right.
hey,
Yeah, I
I've
see
seen
what
this
it's-
before.
I know how this goes.
This is Star Wars. It's, let's go down the list of movies. They've ascribed so much screen time to this weapon, to the mythology of the weapon, that it must be the thing that saves the movie. Which is why then when he shows up in Wakanda, audiences go absolutely insane because they could feel the showdown coming.
Oh, because we've put everybody
Leveled
in
up
Wakanda
Thor.
in complete
Right.
jeopardy because, dog monsters are gonna, they've lowered the shield and these things are gonna rip
Tear
them
them
apart.
apart.
Yeah.
It's not a cliffhanger for the heroes. It's a loss.
It's a loss.
It's a tragedy.
That red marble box lets you do that.
Yeah.
People are coming and they're not gonna throw tomatoes and they're gonna come to the next one. So you can do that.
It was only Civil
or they're-
War, the success of Civil War that allowed us to then do this.
Yeah.
Because we said, hey, okay, everybody, let's just keep locking arms and walking forward into disruption because it's going to lead to better storytelling, which ended up leading to one of the great cliffhangers in movie history.
Yeah.
Fans had an extremely visceral reaction to that
But
because it wasn't what they were expecting.
But also without the story and how the story ended in Civil War, Avengers is always about, you fight together, you win, you fight apart, you lose. They're not together, and they're not together because of Civil War.
Right.
Everything is feeding everything else along the way.
The snap was going, we had talked about the snap being Act 1 of the second movie.
Maybe, yeah.
Right. And I do remember whatever point we came to that conclusion that it was the 5 of us. It was us and Kevin in a room and we all went,
That's the only
fuck
one.
it, it's gotta be the curtain close at the end of the 2 acts, right?
Yeah.
It's the play, that's the curtain
Yeah.
close.
We're talking about the end of
Yeah,
End
well,
of Infinity War.
it's,
Because the question is answered. You're not left hanging going, I wonder how this is going to turn out.
Well,
no.
again, these bold, unconventional choices open up new possibilities. So let's talk about the beginning of Endgame now.
Yeah.
In terms of what kind of storytelling possibilities The fact that Thanos had won the film, the fact that Thanos had beat the Avengers, left these people almost as like non-superheroes.
It is a 3-hour, many hundreds of millions of dollars meditation on grief. It's all about these people trying to cope, some successfully, some really unsuccessfully, with loss. And so you instantly have relatability to the audience because everyone goes through loss. Everyone has people who die. You know, so it's not a superhero problem. It's not like, oh no, he's paralyzed me with his freeze ray. Their friends are dead. And even
Their family are dead.
Even better, they've been dead for 5 fucking years.
Yeah.
You know, and they're not coming back yet.
There were 2 influences. One, we used to always talk about Breaking Bad because I don't know that there has been an exercise in modern media writing where a group of brilliant writers had so successfully written themselves into a corner so continuously over the life of a series where every episode ended, you went, I have no fucking idea how they're gonna solve that in the next episode. So that was an influence where we went, well, fuck, why don't we just shake up the first 30 minutes, 2 big swings, 5 years later, cut off Thanos' head.
So is the other one Fargo?
The other one was Fargo, season 1, had a time jump in it.
Yeah. Which when I watched it, I went, oh, Jesus, you could do that? That's amazing.
What was compelling about it, and this is brilliant Noah Hawley, is that I knew there was still, I think it's 1 or 2 more episodes left. Maybe 2 more episodes.
Yeah, it's not the finale. It's
And it was one of those moments where I went, well, where the fuck's he gonna go from here?
Yeah.
And then he just jumped a year later.
Yeah.
And I went, oh, I'm in for this. And so we were having that issue of like, this can't just be a movie where they all suit up and get on a ship, right? That's the worst version of that film.
That's right.
Yeah.
So we went, oh, let's be cheeky.
Yeah.
Let's tell everyone they're gonna suit up and go have a fight with him.
Well, the goal of
And
the
then they're
second...
gonna chop his head off.
That's right. That's right.
You know, the stones are gone and there's no, like, let's just keep writing ourselves into a corner.
That's what it was. So, I mean, Tran at one point frustratedly said, why can't we just kill this guy? Because Thanos has all the stones, right? So it's a really difficult villain to deal with who can see you coming and can kill you with a look of his eye. So I wish we could just kill him, and then we all slow down and went, what would that mean? If you did kill him, how would it happen? Blah, blah. And so we decided that it meant that he was good to his word, that all he really wanted to do was bring balance to the universe, and whether he dies or not, that is not his primary goal. So to almost allow himself to die would allow you to jump 5 years. And the 5 years allows us to do almost what if. In this way, each of them gets to deal with their grief and their guilt in their own way. And
some not well.
And led us to a rat saving the universe.
That's right.
Circumstantial. So if you go back and dissect the storytelling, right, there is a rat that, you know, famously
if
happens to walk across a...
but it's one of the 14, 13 million? Well, how many possibilities does Strange see?
Very many.
He absolutely saw the rat, and that's how it's
But there were, you and at the time Jeremy Latcham in one of the conference rooms at Marvel talking about like different ways to generate more story. How do they have a hope of? And I remember Googling the quantum realm.
Right.
And it said time is different in the quantum. Like scientists say time is different in the quantum realm.
There it is.
And it was like, we have Ant-Man.
Played by Paul Rudd, who's ageless.
Yes.
So that was
exactly.
That was a bonus.
But it was also like, we have built in through none of our own work, but I mean, this is the beauty of Marvel. We can take this component from another franchise and suddenly it's not just guest star time, it's we vitally need a thing from over here to come and affect our story. And then we got to write the tag for Ant-Man 2 in order to put him in that van and put him in the quantum realm.
And the beauty of it too was that was a corner of the Marvel universe that didn't involve an Infinity Stone.
Right.
Which is like really cool.
Yeah.
That's right. Right.
It's like you could tell that story without ever getting that guy, but suddenly he's essential.
Yeah.
Right.
If there were one critical lesson to take away from all of our collective work at Marvel, what would that be?
Despite all of our self-aggrandizing for the last hour here about how, we changed cinema and crap like that, the lesson I would say, the thing I take away is humility, right? Because I say that a couple reasons. One, my idea is not always the best idea, right?
Best idea wins.
Best idea wins, and that's from a bunch of different, I'm telling you, like Tran saved that franchise because she said that thing.
Why can't we?
You know, and why can't we just kill him? And so like that's a contribution, you know, that wasn't one of the four of us or even Kevin Feige, right? The humility that comes with doing it over and over again and being okay with it getting 3% better and 2% better and then getting 2% worse, and then like just the idea that I know that if we just keep taking the steps up the mountain, we'll get to the top. But it is humbling to be wrong so often on your way to being, I think, right.
Yeah, collaboration is the cornerstone of that. It's why he and I work well together. It's why all four of us work well together, and it's why all of us worked well at Marvel, and why we didn't get fired and replaced at Marvel. Not because we're geniuses, which we all are, but you can fire a genius because they're really irritating, and they won't do what you tell them.
What did I just say about humility?
That's what I love about this. Is a great counterpoint here.
I just mean, but it's the same thing. You have to dump your idea and take theirs and run with it for a while. And at every step, more opinions arrive. Actors show up and they want to say things. And you could either resent it or you could listen to them and go, well, this guy has played him 15 times. He might know something about the character. Jeff Ford comes on and he has this narrative view that is pretty much faultless, and he hasn't been in the trenches with you, so he can come in and go like, why the hell are you doing this scene? It doesn't mean anything. And you're like, oh.
I'm just really attached to that scene. That's right.
And on a pure employment level, for a screenwriter to go 5 movies without getting fired at a single studio is rare. And I'm not patting us on the back for being...
What's that?
This is really depressing.
A little depressing?
Well, it's
You're really depressing the fuck out of these young men. If you could work more than 2 gigs at a studio.
Oh my God.
Not only are you never going to make the highest grossing movie of all time, but you're going to get fired.
I'm talking to the producers and I'm talking to you, young people.
You're over here.
I don't know where
your
you are.
camera's here.
You. Yeah. As we said, with first drafts, second drafts, work only improves if you get to iterate it and repeat it. If you fire people, you get 1 million first drafts and no...
Which is one of the fatal flaws of the business.
maturing.
And something we tried to correct at AGBO, which was let's have creatives come in and be executives, because creatives understand continuity, and we also know how to work with an idea to make that idea better, so that instead of like an executive who's worried about being fired because of quarterly earnings going, I gotta get rid of this writer and get another writer in here because I need a better idea stat, we can just calmly say, we're not worried about quarterly earnings, we just wanna help make this a better idea. Right. And frankly, the thing I learned from Marvel was that discipline is critical. Yeah. We are craftspeople. It is our job to build tables and build them really well. And the only way you can do that is by building a lot of fucking tables, right? And so if you think that you can build 1 or 2 tables and you are an expert at building tables, maybe you got lucky, but you better build 10,000 hours worth of tables to become really good at it. Not being afraid of a disciplined, codified approach, embracing that. Go read Sid Field, go read McKee, go read Joseph Campbell, go read your favorite scripts that are ever written, and then try to identify where in those scripts the things are that Sid Field and McKee are talking about.
Because they are there.
They're there. You could do it with every movie. And this was an interesting process that we had with the Daniels on Everything Everywhere All at Once, because they have a very mercurial artistic process. But that movie conforms exactly to a 3-act structure, irrespective of the swings, the inventive swings it is taking. Yeah. It is telling a structured story. That's why it works and why it worked well. Anyone, irrespective of who you think you are, where you fall on the spectrum of arty to hack, right, needs to tell a 3-act structured story, and the most accomplished way to get there is through hard work and discipline.
And it's precisely because we've all spent so much time building so many tables that we have finally arrived at this one.
Oh,
and this
wow.
Is
you don't say much, but when you do, it's good.
Checkered tablecloth. All right, so we're going to wrap up with what we call small bites. It's sort of rapid fire. Okay. Sometimes it ends up being rapid fire. Sometimes people like to explain their answers. If you could watch anything, film, TV show, whatever, for the first time again, just to recapture that feeling of having watched it for the first time, what would it be?
Like if I could go back and watch Raiders of the Lost Ark at age 11 or 12 or whatever I was when I saw it, I would pay you big money for that.
But now,
Oh, now I'd love to watch it, but I would probably go like, well, that looks fake, or, you know, I don't know what I'd do. But I'd watch Chinatown again for the first time because it is, you know, a complicated, endlessly learn-fromable thing that isn't about visceral excitement. So I can watch it now and go like,
Just as you did when you were 7.
well, I had weird parents. After Blowjob, they turned on that, and then it was, you know, it's good.
Untouchables.
that's a great one. Mamet is so brilliant at structure and character and dialogue.
Yeah.
But he often does it in a way where the storytelling is more obtuse than it is forward. That movie in particular, I think, drives a little bit more, but sometimes there are elements that he plays with. Like Ronin is a prime example of, I have no idea what that fucking
It's an
movie is
exercise.
about. But it's a brilliant exercise, right? We love Ronin. Like, it's one of my favorite films for that reason. There's incredible dialogue in it. There's great action in it. There's great character. Story is not primary to that movie.
Right.
They're moving from beat to beat, but I don't really know why they want it or what's in it, or, you know, it doesn't matter because it's a really fucking entertaining experience.
Yeah, I find Untouchables different than that. I mean, I think it's not only is it a great structure, but it's with memorable characters.
Oh, yeah.
But it's an education plot for a goody two-shoes.
Well, is it one of the primary early models for figuring out Steve Rogers?
Right.
Because
Was like-
Cap's a tough character. in that
Yeah,
movie.
like how do you do a moral character and not have him be the butt of the joke?
Or the most boring character in the
That's
movie.
right.
Yeah, like Ness is awesome, but he is a
Right.
Boy Scout.
But he learns the Chicago way.
Yeah.
Right.
So he cheats at the end, but he cheats in such a way that we go, it's exactly what you should be doing because it's the only way to get
Not
that
only
guy.
cheat, he throws a guy off the roof.
Well, he throws the guy off the roof, but then he switches the juries and all
Yeah.
that. You know,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
he does some stuff that he would not have done when he went into the.
Where he started the film, and that's what's
That's
compelling
right.
and
That's
entertaining
what's
about
right.
watching the
right.
movie.
And again, and just look at that. You know, meets the wise old mentor on page 15 or 17. You know, Connery eats the scenery for the rest of the movie, then he dies in a hail of bullets. Like it's just
This is
all
why
classic.
Mamet's brilliant, though, right? Is because he made a film about a character with integrity,
Yeah.
and then said, and made a commercial movie
Yeah.
that a lot of people paid money for and endorsed. At the end, sometimes you got to get rid of that integrity.
Sometimes you got to throw a guy off the roof.
Yeah,
and
sometimes
again, and this is not to not lionize De Palma there, because it's my favorite De Palma movie. You
Yeah,
know,
of
because
course.
It's a great marriage of that
I'm purely
script
talking about
and
script.
his and
Peak for nearly everybody involved.
really peak for almost everybody involved. You're right.
Okay, this next one is more truly a small bite.
Okay.
I think.
Stop talking.
If you could, if you could work with anyone,
Why? We want to hear ourselves talk.
if you could work with anyone, dead or alive, who would that be?
And I would do this purely for my own satisfaction. It would probably result in not a good product. I would resurrect F. Scott Fitzgerald and try to help him with his failed screenwriting career.
You're going to give notes to Fitzgerald.
Because it didn't work out.
It didn't
It was
work
terrible. He limped along and then he died. He was not built to do it,
He was-
but I would like to help him out.
You could have used a little help.
It's true.
Spielberg's alive, you know.
Yeah.
Yes.
He
And
makes
he
good
needs
movies. He's
Not.
doing
It
fine.
hasn't gone well for him.
There's one last
Piece of
small
advice.
bite that. Well, I want to ask these. I'd love to hear your guys' words on this. What does AGBO mean to you?
AGBO was a way, personally, to not have to sing for my supper, work with people I like, pick projects that either spoke to me or would entertain me for the couple of years that I would, shepherd anything. It was a graduation to a degree. Even if we did a terrible job and they didn't do very well, still going to be really successful movies. I mean, Marvel had afforded us that. These were going to be big. And what do we do after that? Like literally, what do you do? Like, do you do another superhero movie? We could, but it doesn't feel like it's a promotion or like it's like we're
Advancement.
improving ourselves or challenging ourselves or anything like that, right? We could direct, never really been something I'm interested in, or we could step to the side of the traditional structure, and the traditional structure would be Chris and I go out there, tell our agents, all right, we're available. What do people want, what's out there? Or do we have a project we want to do that we've always wanted to do? But we can do that here. So it was really just a safety thing for me. It was, you know, I don't need to make new friends, right? You know, life is short for assholes. You know, I just don't have time, you know? So if I find a bunch of people who are gonna allow me to continue to grow in my craft and take on more responsibility and aren't gonna be assholes about it, I'm in.
So that the idea that we can all still do this and still try and make different things and change as the environment changes is, you know, it continues that sort of like this is very unique feeling that started over at Marvel. Also, I think AGBO officially though stands for All Girls Basketball Organization.
That's correct.
Yeah.
That is correct. By the way.
Well,
Guys, we
Yes,
can't
yeah.
thank you enough for this very thoughtful conversation.
thank you guys.
Sure, thank you.
Gentlemen.
Manja bene. We'll see you next time on Pizza Film School.
Oh, wow, yeah, man, it's Pizza Film School. About to learn about the movies, man. Whoa, it's real cool.